Amazon Health AI presents Painful Thoughts.
I can't stop scratching my downtown. Yeah, but I'm not itching to go downtown and tell a receptionist I'm here to talk about my downtown. Some things you'd rather type than say out loud.
There's no question too embarrassing for Amazon Health AI. Chat your symptoms and get virtual care 24/7. Healthcare just got less painful.
You know, when engineers want to know if a bridge is actually safe, they don't just look at it on a calm, sunny afternoon.
Right, that wouldn't tell you much.
Exactly. They stress test it. They apply extreme simulated pressure. So sometimes they're vibrating the concrete or, loading it with massive unbalanced weight to see exactly how the structure reacts.
You have to see where it bends.
And where the microscopic cracks finally start to widen. Because honestly, it's the only way to expose hidden vulnerabilities.
I mean, that's because systems, whether they're physical structures of concrete and steel or abstract ones like governments and global supply chains, they often project this illusion of total stability.
Right.
You only really see their true underlying nature when they are pushed to the absolute brink.
And that is exactly what we were looking at today in this deep dive. We're putting a magnifying glass on one specific, highly chaotic snapshot in time, which is July 22, 2026.
It's a very busy day.
Oh, incredibly busy. If you just glance at the headlines from this day, it looks like a dizzying random array of isolated events. I mean, you've got boiling street protests over medical exams in Delhi, massive tunnels collapsing in the Himalayas, a geopolitical chess match freezing oil shipments in the Middle East.
Plus aggressive protectionist trade policies in Washington.
Right, and even discoveries stretching into deep time and deep space. But, for you listening, these aren't random. They're deeply interconnected pieces of a global system under immense synchronized pressure.
Yeah, the overarching narrative here is really about systemic pressures and responses.
Yeah.
We're examining how various infrastructures, political, legal, economic, geological, react when a massive load is applied.
And what happens when the safety valves fail?
Exactly. What happens when the valves designed to release that pressure completely break down?
So let's start with a pressure cooker right here at home that has essentially blown its lid. We are talking about the nationwide agitation over the NEET medical exam leaks. For context, the National Eligibility Come Entrance Test is the sole gateway for millions of students trying to enter medical schools. So when the integrity of that exam fails, it doesn't just upset people.
Well, it shatters the life plans of an entire generation.
Right. But looking at the sources today, this has escalated way, way beyond angry students just holding placards.
Oh, the scale has morphed entirely. What began as an outcry over an exam leak it's been catalyzed into a nationwide proxy battle for institutional accountability.
Yeah.
On July 21st, opposition parties, specifically the Congress and the Cockroach Janta Party, or CJP, they organized thousands of protesters at Jantar Mantar.
We even saw Rahul Gandhi lead a march directly toward the Prime Minister's residence, right?
We did, yeah. Which actually resulted in the detention of several members of parliament.
And the physical nature of the protests is shifting, too. It's becoming a literal street-level arms race.
Yeah, it's intense.
Because after early videos circulated showing tear gas clashes, demonstrators just adapted overnight. The sources note that first-time protesters are now showing up equipped with swimming goggles to block the gas.
Swimming goggles, wow.
Yeah, goggles, N95 masks, and heavy helmets. And the police are reporting 118 injured personnel and 70 detained protesters in Delhi alone.
And this pressure is radiating outward. It's not just Delhi.
Right. It's spilling over.
Exactly. It spilled over into Rajasthan with massive student marches in Udaipur and Congress blockades in Jaipur.
Which led to some high-profile detentions, I think.
Yes. Senior political figures like former Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot were detained. Which brings us to the failure of the system's primary safety valve.
The parliament.
Right. In a functional parliamentary democracy, massive street pressure is supposed to be vented and debated in the legislature. Parliament is the valve.
But the valve is completely jammed right now.
Entirely. Day 2 of the monsoon session collapsed under the weight of this issue. Both the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha were repeatedly adjourned. The legislative branch simply ground to a halt.
Meaning they failed to pass unrelated but critical legislation?
Exactly. Things like the National Honor Amendment or the Supreme Court bills just stalled out. The political system couldn't process the input, so it gridlocked.
Well, amid all this political paralysis, I want to look at a fascinating legal intervention that happened at the exact same time.
The Sonam Wangchuk case.
Yeah. So the climate activist Sonam Wangchuk was on day 23 of a hunger strike. Now, the state had him in Safdarjung, which is a government hospital.
Right.
But the Delhi High Court stepped in and ordered his transfer to Medanta, a private hospital, affirming his fundamental rights to choose his own medical care.
It's a very significant ruling.
I need you to unpack the legal mechanics here for us, because Article 21 guarantees the right to life, and the state usually argues it has a duty to keep a fasting protester alive, sometimes even against their will.
Yes, that's the standard state argument.
So how did the High Court navigate that tension between the state's duty to preserve life and a protester's bodily autonomy?
Well, the court executed a very precise, very elegant legal maneuver. They completely decoupled the medical rights of the individual from the political context of his actions.
How so?
So the Solicitor General tried to argue that while the government didn't object to the transfer itself, they were deeply concerned that Wangchuk might seek discharge against medical advice to continue his strike.
So they were worried about what he would do next.
Exactly. But the court essentially refused to entertain those political hypotheticals. They leaned heavily on Article 21, the right to life and personal liberty, and Article 19, which protects freedom of expression.
So they prioritized his immediate rights as a patient over his status as a protester.
That's it. The ruling established that even when a citizen is engaged in a highly charged political protest against the state, their fundamental bodily autonomy does not just evaporate.
The state can't use a hospital as a political jail.
Precisely. They cannot use a government hospital as a tool of political containment under the guise of medical care. It sets a massive precedent for how the state must handle the civil liberties of dissenting bodies in the future.
Okay, so the judiciary acted as a functioning circuit breaker when the political machinery was short-circuiting.
That's a good way to put it.
But what happens when the pressure isn't political, but geological? I want to move from the gridlock of human laws to the literal physical collapse of human infrastructure.
The situation in the Himalayas.
Yeah, because the contrast between what's happening in Delhi and what's happening there is stark. While lawmakers were arguing, a massive tragedy unfolded in Sikkim.
We are looking at the collapse of ADIT-3, which is a section of the under-construction NHPC Tista Stage Vedi hydropower tunnel.
Just to help you visualize the scale here, this is a 13.8-kilometer tunnel being bored straight through the mountains.
It's a massive engineering undertaking. And a landslide blocked the entrance of the tunnel, which resulted in the deaths of 12 workers, with another 25 initially trapped inside.
The sources mention that a suspected gas leak was a major factor here following the landslide.
Yes, that's what made it so deadly.
How exactly does a landslide on the outside trigger a lethal gas leak on the inside of a tunnel?
It comes down to the extreme volatility of Himalayan geology. When you are boring a 13-kilometer hole through tectonically active rock, you frequently hit naturally occurring pockets of trapped gases.
Like methane or something.
Exactly, methane or hydrogen sulfide. Normally, industrial ventilation systems pump fresh air in and extract the dangerous gases out.
Just continuously venting it.
Right. But when millions of tons of rock and mud slide down the mountain and completely seal the tunnel's entrance, two things happen instantly.
The power cuts out.
Yes, the ventilation system is crushed or loses power. And second, the physical exit for the gas is plugged.
Oh, wow. So it just builds up.
Yeah, the natural gas continues to seep from the exposed rock, rapidly accumulating in a now sealed chamber. It turns an engineering marvel into a lethal environment in minutes.
That is absolutely terrifying. And while rescue teams are literally digging through that mountain in Sikkim, the military is navigating extreme flooding in Assam.
The contrast is pretty striking.
It is. We have the Army's Spear Corps running Operation Jal Rahat. They're using motorboats to navigate treacherous floodwaters, rescuing over 570 stranded people across Sivasagar, Shuriday, and Jorhat.
It's an impressive operation.
It is, and we rightly celebrate these military rescue missions as heroic, but honestly, watching the Army deploy engineering tools and medical kits in motorboats just to save civilians from annual monsoons, it feels a bit dystopian.
How do you mean?
Well, aren't we just relying on the military to put a Band-Aid on fundamentally broken civil infrastructure?
You know, it reveals a fascinating and deeply concerning duality in state capacity. On one hand, you have proactive civil infrastructure, hydropower tunnels, drainage systems, flood barriers, which is repeatedly proving to be incredibly fragile.
Because we're building it in the wrong places.
Yeah. We build massive, rigid structures in some of the most dynamic, shifting terrain on Earth, and nature consistently overwhelms them. But on the other hand, you have reactive emergency response, primarily the armed forces, which is highly capable, adaptable, and robust.
So we are terrible at preventing the disaster, but incredibly efficient at pulling people out of the rubble.
That's exactly the dynamic. The military has become the ultimate permanent backstop for civil failures.
That's not a solution.
No, because relying on the Spear Corps to act as an ad hoc emergency service doesn't fix the underlying fragility of the civil systems. You cannot rescue your way out of poor urban planning or ecologically reckless construction.
And that systemic fragility isn't just a domestic issue, you know? Let's look at how global conflicts create pressures that reach directly into your daily life as a listener.
Shifting to the Middle East.
Yeah. The Middle East acts as a global pressure valve for energy and trade. And the sources note that the U.S. has launched its 11th straight night of military strikes on Iran.
While Iran-backed Houthi rebels have declared a sweeping naval blockade of Saudi Arabia in the Red Sea.
The immediate measurable response to this geopolitical pressure is economic, right?
Absolutely. Crude oil abruptly pushed past $91 a barrel. But the systemic friction goes much deeper than just the price of a commodity. It's about the physical logistics of moving that commodity.
Right, because this immediately triggered a massive logistical freeze in India.
The huge one.
Indian Oil Corporation and MRPL abruptly halted the loading of roughly 2 million barrels of Iraqi crude on vessels, including a massive tanker called the Leela Jamnagar.
The risk of navigating the Strait of Hormuz is just deemed too extreme right now.
So, for the listener wondering how a halted ship in the Persian Gulf actually affects their morning commute, what is the mechanism that translates this geopolitical chess match into higher prices at the local petrol pump?
The mechanism is a cascading series of risk premiums. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow choke point that handles about 1/5 of global energy supplies.
1/5? That's massive.
Huge. So when a conflict escalates, maritime insurance companies either refuse to insure vessels passing through that strait, or they hike the premiums to astronomical levels.
Which forces companies to back out.
Right. When Indian refiners like IOC cancel those loadings out of Basra, they now have a sudden supply deficit. To keep the lights on and the cars running in India, they have to instantly source replacement oil from other regions, usually on the spot market, at a massive premium.
Plus, they have to pay for longer shipping routes to avoid the conflict zone entirely.
Exactly. Those compounded costs, insurance, spot market premiums, rerouting, are ultimately absorbed by the system and passed directly down the chain.
To the consumer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Within weeks, you pay for that geopolitical friction every time you fill your tank or buy groceries transported by diesel trucks.
The cost of conflict always trickles down. But diplomacy also has its own mechanisms for managing pressure, sometimes by doing absolutely nothing at all.
The Canada-Pakistan situation.
Exactly. Let's look at that. Canada's foreign minister, Anita Anand, went to Islamabad. According to the sources, Pakistan essentially pleaded for Canada to publicly support the restoration of the Indus Waters Treaty.
Which is a very sensitive issue.
Very. For context, this is a 6-decade-old water-sharing agreement that India recently suspended over cross-border terrorism concerns, but Anand deliberately sidestepped the issue. Complete, deafening silence.
Yeah, she didn't engage with it at all.
What?
Now playing on Netflix, The Hawk. From the mind of Will Ferrell
Oh, mama, I'm back!
comes a new original series.
Get ready, get ready. That's it. Did I stutter?
When an iconic pro golfer
Lonnie,
Honka!
takes one last swing at greatness,
you were a big shot golfer.
I still am a big shot golfer.
no one
Dad, I'm the Hawk now.
will stand in his way.
That's how it's done.
The Hawk, now playing only on Netflix.
Is Ottawa actually signaling with this omission?
That silence is a highly calculated diplomatic mechanism. It is a strategic freeze designed to prevent an already strained system from overheating.
Because of Canada's relationship with India right now?
Yes, Canada's relationship with India is currently at a historic low point. Ottawa knows that New Delhi views the Indus Waters Treaty as a strictly bilateral issue.
India doesn't want outside interference.
Exactly. India has drawn a hard line that it remains suspended until Islamabad verifiably addresses terrorism. If Canada were to publicly side with Pakistan on this treaty, it would instantly trigger a massive diplomatic blowback from India.
So by intentionally omitting any reference to the treaty in her official statements, Anand is signaling what exactly?
She's signaling that Canada refuses to be weaponized in the India-Pakistan dispute. So for New Delhi, Pakistan's inability to leverage Canada is a quiet but significant diplomatic victory.
It shows that international actors are adjusting their behavior to avoid triggering further friction with the Indian government.
Precisely.
Well, speaking of friction with India, geopolitics isn't just about naval blockades and diplomatic chess, it's about trade barriers.
The new policies from Washington.
Right. The new Trump administration in the U.S. is erecting some massive protectionist walls that take direct aim at India's two most valuable exports:
Generic drugs and student talent.
Let's unpack these pharmaceutical tariffs first, because this sounds less like a tariff and more like a financial centrifuge designed to violently rip supply chains apart.
It is a radically aggressive policy designed to force manufacturing back to American soil.
What are the numbers?
Trump announced a phased tariff plan on imported generics. It stays at 0% until August 2026. Then, it rockets to 100% for a year and finally hits a staggering 200% by August 2029.
And we have to remember, India supplies roughly 30% of the world's generic medicines.
It's a cornerstone of the industry.
Yeah, the Indian pharma industry has spent decades mastering reverse engineering and achieving massive economies of scale to produce these drugs cheaply. A 200% tariff makes that mathematically impossible to sustain in the U.S. market.
Completely impossible.
So can Indian companies just pivot? The sources mention the UK market is growing at over 8% for Indian pharma. Can they just redirect their shipments to Europe, or is the U.S. market simply too large a gravitational force to escape?
The U.S. market is an inescapable gravitational force.
There's just no replacing it.
No, it is simply too massive and too lucrative. An 8% growth in the UK market doesn't provide nearly enough volume to absorb the excess manufacturing capacity India would have if it lost the U.S.
So what are these companies supposed to do?
This policy forces Indian pharmaceutical companies into a brutal capital expenditure calculus. Do they pay a 200% tariff, which entirely destroys their price advantage and makes them uncompetitive? Or do they absorb the massive multi-billion-dollar cost of physically building new manufacturing facilities inside the United States within a tight 3-year window?
It's a manufactured systemic shock.
It absolutely is.
And it isn't just medicines facing this shock, it's human minds. The Trump administration is ending what's called the duration of status policy for U.S. F1 and J1 visas.
This is a huge shift for international students.
Yeah, if you've ever studied abroad, you know exactly what duration of status means. As long as you are actively enrolled in your academic program, your visa is valid, it's flexible.
But not anymore.
Right. Now, international students will face fixed-term visas strictly capped at 4 years. Think about an Indian student trying to get a PhD in the U.S. A PhD routinely takes 5 to 7 years. Doesn't a hard 4-year limit essentially turn academic research into a constant, looming administrative crisis?
It does. It intentionally injects extreme friction into the immigration system to limit overstays, but the collateral damage is the academic process itself.
It must be terrifying for the students.
It places an immense psychological and bureaucratic burden on global talent. Under this new rule, a brilliant researcher is forced to apply for an extension right in the middle of their most critical work.
And if the paperwork gets delayed?
If the bureaucracy stalls, or if an administrator makes an error, that student risks falling out of legal status overnight. The environment shifts entirely from one of deep academic focus to one of constant, low-level immigration terror.
You are applying rigid bureaucratic deadlines to the inherently unpredictable process of scientific discovery.
Exactly. It's the rigid bureaucracy overriding the actual goal of the system.
Which, surprisingly, brings us perfectly to our next topic.
The sports management crisis.
Yes. I want to transition from the rigid, sometimes irrational bureaucracy of international visas to the equally irrational bureaucracy of sports management. Because human systems fail in fascinating ways, even on a cricket pitch. Ravichandran Ashwin just came out swinging against Gautam Gambhir's management for sidelining the spinner Kuldeep Yadav.
The criticism was very sharp and mathematically backed.
Yeah, Ashwin didn't hold back.
Now, he pointed out a glaring statistical anomaly. Since Gambhir took charge, India has played 104 international matches across formats. But Kuldeep Yadav, who is arguably one of the most lethal wrist spinners on the planet with 170 wickets in just 120 matches, has only been played in 38 of them.
And he was inexplicably dropped at Lord's, right?
Yes, a match where the team explicitly opted to bolster its bowling strength.
Ashwin actually called it a batsman's world that shows zero confidence in the bowler. It really highlights how even in a heavily data-driven environment like modern sports, perfectly good, objectively superior talent can just be sidelined by a coach's subjective preferences.
It depends all the time.
When a system ignores its own best assets because of internal bias, the system becomes irrational.
It is the human element of systemic failure. You can have all the metrics in the world, and Ashwin even noted that Kuldeep's record surpasses Adam Zampa's. But if the subjective vision of the leadership doesn't favor that style of play, the asset just rots on the bench.
Well, from the subjective chaos of human systems, let's pivot to something entirely objective. Let's look at the literal physical systems of the Earth itself. We have a massive geological breakthrough out of Madhya Pradesh.
The Pichor orbicular granite.
Yes. Researchers have dated this granite in the Bundelkhand Craton, and this rock is 2.56 billion years old.
This is a phenomenal window into deep time. Orbicular granite is incredibly rare. It features these striking concentric spheres called orbicules that can be up to 30 centimeters wide.
I was looking at pictures of this, and I have to ask, how do massive rock spheres form naturally like that?
They form through a violent thermal contrast.
Okay, what does it mean?
Imagine a plume of incredibly hot magma rapidly intruding into a chamber of much cooler magma. That sudden temperature difference causes rapid layered crystallization around small rock fragments suspended in the melt.
Oh, kind of building up these concentric shells like a geological jawbreaker?
That's a perfect analogy, yeah.
Yeah.
But the real scientific breakthrough here is the chemical signature locked inside those spheres. It proves that this specific magma originated from the melting of much older continental crust.
Meaning crust recycling. We always thought that early Earth was fairly stagnant, but this proves that 2.56 billion years ago, the Earth was already violently tearing down its own continents, melting them in the mantle and pushing them back up to rebuild itself.
Exactly.
Why is that specific mechanism, crust recycling, so vital for us to understand?
Because crust recycling is the engine of plate tectonics, and plate tectonics is the thermostat of the planet. When crust is recycled, it regulates the carbon cycle.
So it's basically breathing out the gases we need.
Right. It releases essential minerals and gases that eventually stabilize the Earth's climate and allowed complex life to evolve and thrive over billions of years. Without that dynamic system of destruction and rebirth, Earth would likely be a dead static rock like Mars.
So the Earth survived by constantly remaking itself. And speaking of planetary survival, let's look at how we are trying to engineer our own survival today. China is preparing a massive planetary defense experiment.
This is a huge leap in aerospace engineering.
By 2030, they want to crash a spacecraft into a near-Earth asteroid, and they aren't just bumping it, they want to hit it at a staggering 9 kilometers per second. To put that in perspective, NASA's DART mission in 2022 was widely celebrated, but it only hit its target at about 6.1 kilometers per second.
It's a massive increase in speed.
How exactly does kinetic impact save the Earth, though? Because blowing up an asteroid just creates a shotgun blast of radioactive space rocks heading toward us, right?
Precisely. You do not want to shatter the asteroid.
So what's the goal?
The mechanism of kinetic deflection relies entirely on transferring momentum. Kinetic energy scales exponentially with velocity. By pushing the impact speed to 9 kilometers per second, China is testing how to transfer an immense amount of energy into the asteroid's mass without necessarily breaking it apart.
Just giving it a really hard shove.
Exactly. The goal is to alter the asteroid's orbital velocity by just a fraction of a millimeter per second. In the vacuum of space, if you nudge an asteroid just slightly, years before it is scheduled to cross Earth's orbit, that tiny change in trajectory compounds over millions of miles.
And it ultimately misses our planet by a wide margin.
Exactly.
It is just incredible. We are literally engineering hypervelocity kinetic systems to punch celestial bodies out of the sky.
It really puts our technological scale into perspective.
It does. What a dizzying, fascinating map we've drawn today. We started with the extreme pressure cooker of student protests in Delhi, looked at the tragic failure of Himalayan infrastructure, and traced the global choke points from Middle Eastern oil to Canadian diplomatic silence.
It's all connected.
Yeah, we analyzed the bureaucratic friction of U.S. trade and visa policies, questioned sports management, and ended up discussing the deep time of billion-year-old magma and the deep space mechanics of asteroid deflection. Thank you so much for joining us as we connected the dots on this chaotic day.
Before we go, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
Go ahead.
We just talked about that 2.56 billion-year-old Pichor granite. That rock survived billions of years of cosmic bombardment, violent volcanic chaos, and the literal grinding of tectonic plates.
Yeah, it's virtually indestructible.
You'd think so. Yet the researchers who made this incredible discovery warned that today this ancient, exposed rock formation is severely threatened by simple, everyday human farming and quarrying activities.
Oh, wow.
It is a profound irony. We're designing hypervelocity planetary defense systems to protect the Earth from space. But the most immediate persistent threat to our history, and ultimately to our future, comes from the slow, daily pressure of our own footprint. We are the ultimate stress test on the systems around us.
We are the stress test. It is definitely something to think about the next time you look at the structures around you. Thanks for listening to this deep dive, and keep questioning the systems in your world.